with Democrats. So the past 3 years, they were being polite. The lead starts right now. Breaking news, new details on the scramble inside the White House right after the president pushed the leader of Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden, as CNN learns that impeachment could go far beyond just the Ukraine scandal. A new twist. Trump allies in Congress now want a vote on the impeachment inquiry in the House, and Speaker Pelosi does not. Why? Plus, the Supreme Court debating the meaning of sex in a critical case for LGBTQ rights, and a justice that President Trump appointed could potentially be the swing vote. Welcome to The Lead. I'm Jake Tapper, and we begin with the politics lead. Today, House Democrats are saying they will issue a subpoena against a key witness in the Ukraine scandal for documents and his testimony after the White House today blocked him from testifying on Capitol Hill, as Democrats probe details concerning President Trump using the power of his office to push a foreign country to conduct investigations to help him politically. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called the president blocking this key witness a, quote, abuse of power. That key witness is U.S. Ambassador to the European Union and major Trump donor Gordon Sondland. Republican Senator Ron Johnson told the Wall Street Journal that Sondland told him that U.S. military aid to Ukraine was tied to Ukraine agreeing to, quote, get to the bottom of what happened in 2016. That's Trump speak for a push to undermine the Mueller investigation and the larger conclusion by U.S. intelligence that Russia interfered in the election to help President Trump. That conversation on top of the recently released text messages linking U.S. aid to Ukraine investigating the Bidens. The top diplomat in Ukraine, Bill Taylor, wrote to Sondland, quote, as I said on the phone, I think it's crazy to withhold security assistance for help with a political campaign, unquote. Sondland waited about 5 hours and then replied, quote, Bill, I believe you are incorrect about President Trump's intentions. The president has been crystal clear, no quid pro quos of any kind. A source now tells CNN that during that time gap, Sondland phoned President Trump himself. Now, the president has said publicly that the Ukraine conversation was, quote, perfect, that there's nothing wrong with what he's done, that there was no quid pro quo. That's what he says. Now, what he and the White House have done, well, that's a different matter. They hid the rough transcript of the call with the president of Ukraine in a hyper-secure computer system. They tried to keep it from Congress after the whistleblower went to the inspector general. They're attacking the whistleblower. And now, as of today, they're blocking witnesses. We'll leave it to you to judge if that's how officials with nothing to hide behave. CNN's Caitlin Collins picks up our coverage now with new reporting on how the White House immediately tried to bury that Ukraine call to keep it from the American people.
Today, the White House intervened for the first time to stop a key witness from cooperating with Democrats' impeachment inquiry, blocking top diplomat Gordon Sondland from showing up for his deposition only hours before it was scheduled to take place.
By preventing us from hearing from this witness and obtaining these documents, the President and Secretary of State are taking actions that prevent us from getting the facts needed to protect the nation's security.
President Trump said he stopped it because the inquiry is illegitimate, calling it a totally compromised kangaroo court. His allies signaling this could be a broader strategy to stonewall, with one saying the days of playing nice are done.
When you have a Speaker of the House who says we need to strike while the iron's hot, when you have a chairman of the committee who is so biased against this president.
The fight coming as CNN is learning more about the call that started it all. Sources say as soon as Trump hung up with Ukraine's president in late July, a mad scramble began inside the administration. At least one National Security Council official alerted the White House's national security lawyers that there were concerns about what Trump said. Those are the same lawyers who later ordered the transcript moved to a more secure server in order to limit those who could see it. Several aides frantically asked if they should notify other senior officials who weren't on the call, like those at the Justice Department, since Trump had invoked the Attorney General's name several times. The focus now turning to those who listened in during the call, including the Secretary of State, top national security officials, and aides for the Vice President and Chief of Staff. Democrats say despite White House efforts to stonewall, they'll continue their investigation of whether Trump abused the power of his office.
Through this impeachment inquiry, we are determined to find the answers. Thank you.
Now, Jake, we're also learning that the White House has reached out to outside attorneys to get counsel on impeachment. One of those, according to what a source told my colleague Pam Brown, is a former congressman from South Carolina, Trey Gowdy. Now, that follows CNN reporting that the president had been initially resistant to the idea of forming an impeachment defense team or bringing in new attorneys, believing that doing either would make him look weak.
All right. Caitlin Collins at the White House, thank you so much. Let's chew over all of this with my experts. Amanda, I'm interested in your opinion on this. To me, just having covered enough of these things, Taylor's texts in which he says, just as I said on the phone call, blah, 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 I don't approve of this, is what he's saying, read like somebody trying to establish a paper trail.
Yes.
And Sondland's text, which came 5 hours later or so, to me, read like somebody who just talked to a lawyer and said, what should I write back?
Yeah.
Do you agree? I mean, is that your take?
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I wonder why the House isn't going after Bill Taylor more. I mean, he is the key to this. He is the guy who clearly saw something was going wrong and tried to document it. And maybe they're trying to work something out behind the scenes, but this sort of goose chase to try to get Sunderland and try to get the president's lackneys, I don't understand that. Talk to people who want to talk. Talk to people who are trying to document this rather than trying to go after hostile witnesses and building up a case about obstruction.
I'm sure that, I don't know, but I'm sure they're going after Taylor, too. Phil, I want to get your take on this. How does this read to you? Taylor says, quote, this is a text message on WhatsApp. Are we now saying that security assistants in the White House meeting are conditioned on investigations, which is basically a quid pro quo? Sondland writes back, call me. What does that mean to you? Call me.
I mean, I only spent 25 years in government. I mean, just only, but this is
just called him.
This is pretty simple. You're correct. This is called record copy. That is the appointed official, that is the non-Trump official. The ambassador is saying, I want it on the record what we're doing here, because phone conversations are going to be he said, she said, if it ever goes public. The individual on the other end of the line, in this case, text messaging, is saying, I don't want that on the record. Call me, because a phone call is going to be, it's months ago, nobody remembers. Both of them are trying to, as you suggested, it's not what you think, Jake. This is a fact. Yeah. It's what you suggested. They both want a record copy. Each of them, the career guy wants a record copy saying the president just screwed us. Yeah. The political guy wants a record copy that says that never happened.
And how is the White House preparing for this other than mean tweets and just having, their minions in Congress go out there and lie?
It is very telling that even though Sondland's testimony has been scheduled for many days now, the decision to pull his testimony only came last night. They are making a lot of these decisions on the fly, responding in large part to what the president wants. The president himself made it clear that he was the one who was not comfortable with Sondland testifying. Here's why all of this previous conversation we were just having and that question are related. Sondland is the person who was communicating directly with President Trump about all of this, all of it. So Bill Taylor knows what he thinks was going on. Sondland knows what was actually going on because he was communicating with the principal about it. That's what makes him such an important witness. It's also what makes the White House and the president nervous about him getting in a setting where he's testifying under oath and cannot lie to Congress without risking, potential jail time.
And let's talk about Sondland for 1 second. Okay, he's a very, very wealthy hotel guy. He was a Jeb Bush backer, then gave $1 million to President Trump's inaugural committee, got in on that way. Now, he is the U.S. ambassador to the European Union. Now, I'm no expert on international affairs, but last I checked, Ukraine is not in the European Union. So what is he doing here in your view?
Well, I think he's trying to execute the orders of the boss man, and that's the challenge with political appointees often versus a civil service or career officials who are dedicated to the cause rather than to the person. The entire State Department right now has been rattled not just by this incident, but previous IG reports from even this past summer about how political appointees have been calling holdovers traitors and questioning their loyalty to Donald Trump. And it underscores how important it is to have a service that is dedicated to American values and the Constitution. That's ultimately what's being tested here with this. Unfortunately, the Trump administration seems to be hanging their hat on this idea that they argued in court today that the Nixon impeachment process was improper, and that I'm like, that's your argument, that Nixon was railroaded. When you've gone that far down the line, it shows that you are far more interested in obstructing justice than you are in telling the truth.
Oh, Geraldo Rivera told Sean Hannity the other day, I'm paraphrasing, but something like, thank God for you. If you'd been around during Nixon, he never would have been impeached.
This to me is kind of painful as a former government guy. When new people come into town, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, people like me were viewed as suspect. It's like two dogs at a fire hydrant. They're sniffing out each other saying, who's the other dog here? When the new guys come in, the political guys are saying, these guys know a lot at the CIA, the FBI, the State Department, but they're not reliable. This is a reliability test. The political guys saying, I can't trust you. You better call me because I'm afraid you're going to take these texts and give them away to somebody. Very simple.
And Amanda, I believe that it's been reported that these texts were on personal devices on the WhatsApp app, which is to keep stuff from individuals.
And this is clearly official communication.
Yeah, obviously this is about official stuff. And as Intelligence Chairman Adam Schiff said today, the State Department also has personal devices belonging to Sondland with more text and more emails they want to see. I recall them being offended when somebody else had like
what was her name?
Yeah, had a system for avoiding this kind of a way that the government can easily get to something.
Yeah, these secret servers and secret messaging apps are going to come back to bite you. But there is an interesting talking point I'm seeing gain a lot of steam in conservative circles and among Republicans who are really trying to rationalize this. They just come out and say, you know what? This is bad. All this is bad, the messages, the secret services, but it's not impeachable. We need an election to decide what's going on. And after the Mueller report, I thought that was a decent rationale. Let the election decide it. But the thing that you have here, you have the president and a lot of his men participating in election offenses. So how do you ensure that you're going to have a free and fair election in 2020 when the president has shown a willingness 3 times with Russia, Ukraine, and China to cheat? This is what it goes down to. People keep talking about election interference, foreign interference. It's cheating to win an election. So Republicans, if you don't want to impeach him, what are you going to do to stop it? I don't know that answer.
All right, everyone stick around. We got a lot more to talk about. The 2 moves congressional Republicans just made on the Hill in an attempt to push back against the impeachment inquiry. Plus, the NBA now saying that they're not sorry for that tweet that could cost the league billions of dollars in China. Stay with us. For a Sondland, Speaker Pelosi says she does not need a full House vote. Why are Republicans pushing this?
Really, Jake, for political and practical reasons. First, on the process, Republicans believe that if they have a full House vote to authorize the impeachment inquiry, it potentially could give them power that they don't have right now, at least more power than they have right now, potentially even giving them a chance to subpoena their own witnesses, subpoena their own information that they want. And politically speaking, Republicans certainly here see this as an opportunity essentially to delegitimize the Democrats-led impeachment inquiry, to try to reframe the narrative essentially that, as we've heard them say over and over again, as we have heard out of the White House, that the Democrats have not voted on the full floor to authorize the impeachment inquiry. And as you said, Speaker Pelosi, she has not ruled out a full House vote, but she doesn't believe that it's necessary.
And at the same time, obviously, Democrats control the House, Republicans control the Senate, and Senator Lindsey Graham there said, as chairman of the Judiciary Committee, he has invited Rudy Giuliani, the president's personal attorney, to testify. What will that accomplish?
That's right. And this would essentially put Rudy Giuliani in front of a much, much friendlier audience over here in the Senate than he would be if he were to appear in front of the House. And even in making it in that announcement today, the fact that this committee is not only chaired by a top Republican here in the Senate, Lindsey Graham, but one of the fiercest defenders and friends of President Trump. And Graham, in making that announcement, acknowledged, he said he wanted to hold a hearing on corruption and other improprieties in Ukraine, and not even really saying anything about the format, no word if it would be an open session or not. So certainly much better set of circumstances potentially laid out for him, Senate side than House side. Giuliani today telling CNN that he's still a lawyer, will still have to deal with privilege, but he added, given the nature of Graham's invitation about my concerns, I might be able to do it without discussing privileged information. Jake.
All right, Sondland Serfati on Capitol Hill for us. Thanks so much. I want to bring in former federal prosecutor Elliot Williams, along with former FBI General Counsel Jim Baker. Thanks so much for being here. Elliot, let me start with you. I understand the political arguments for not holding a formal vote on the impeachment inquiry. They don't want to give the Republicans more power, including subpoena power, the Democrats, and cloud everything up. They don't want to protect their vulnerable members. Those are political arguments. I don't hear a legal argument, and I don't hear like a principle beyond wanting to control the process. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. There isn't a legal argument here. What they're trying to do is two things. Number one, make it about process, because, if you're talking about process, you're not talking about the substance. And if you're talking about the process, you're not talking about the president's conduct. And number two, what they're trying to do is put vulnerable Democrats in the position of having to vote on whether they proceed with impeachment. These Democrats in Trump-won districts. But no, there isn't a legal basis here. What happens is when an article of impeachment is introduced, the House of Representatives will vote on it. But you don't have to have a vote to decide you're moving forward with impeachment. That's silly.
And Jim, let me ask you, as a law enforcement person, how would you advise Democrats to proceed to make this as much about law and standards of law and standards of behavior and not about all the political mess?
Well, focus on what the law is that applies in this area. And the law that applies in this area is the Constitution directly. That's where the focus should be, not on statutes or the procedural rules and so on. And so to echo what Elliot was saying, the president and outsiders don't get to tell the House of Representatives how to deal with impeachment. That is, by the Constitution, reserved to them. They're the ones that decide the process. They decide the substance. They decide whether to go forward or not. And so we're talking directly about the law here is the Constitution of the United States, and the House gets to decide, not these extraneous bodies. And the minority can't force the majority to do what they don't want to do.
Elliot, the top lawyer for the House Democrats, told a federal judge today that President Trump could be impeached for lying to the American public. That's not a crime, lying to the American public. It's a crime to lie to the FBI, but not to the American public or to prosecutors, right, but not to me. And the president would not have to commit a crime to be impeached. That sounds like they're kind of like outlining what the strategy in the House might be in court.
Right. So ultimately, Congress has sort of said there's no real rules on what constitutes a high crime and misdemeanor, which are the words in the Constitution, what's impeachable. Typically, what Congress has found is, number one, if a president or a high official has abused power. Number two, engaged in behavior that's incompatible with the roles of the office. Or three, acted for personal gain. So certainly, acting in an obstructive manner would fall into that conduct. But there doesn't have to be a crime committed in the sense that, he met the standard for obstruction of justice or something like that. If one of those three areas is met, absolutely it's impeachable.
And Jim, the House lawyer, the Democrats' lawyer, said also that impeachment threads could also include, theoretically, findings from the Mueller investigation and the Mueller report, and that Speaker Pelosi's on board with that. Do you think that's smart, or would it be better just to keep it focused exclusively on this Ukraine story?
Yeah, so I think technically they could do it, and Doug Letter, who represented the House, is a superb lawyer, and so they could do it. I'm just worried that is going to drag them. It's going to delay things and have the focus lost. Right now, it seems like the American people, at least a significant number of them, are upset about the president's conduct with respect to Ukraine and his comment about China. And so I guess I would try to focus on that. When you're investigating or prosecuting any type of case, you don't want to load up, for example, your indictment with a bunch of extraneous stuff if you think it's going to distract the jury or open the door to the defendant making sort of a circus in front of the jury. So a tight, focused proceeding is probably in their best interest.
All right, Jim, Elliot, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Breaking news on President Trump's call with Ukraine. The New York Times is reporting on one White House official's concerning description of that call. Breaking news, the New York Times is reporting that a White House official who was listening to that Trump-Ukraine call in July described the conversation as crazy and frightening. Those words in quotes, crazy and frightening. The official was, quote, visibly shaken by what had happened, according to a memo written by the whistleblower, the Times reports. let's chat about this. Is this the kind of thing that normally would be in a whistleblower report, that other people reacted saying that they were shocked and frightened?
Boy, if I'm in the whistleblower team, I am really careful about this. If you read the initial report, as a former CIA guy, very well written, factual, sort of unemotional. This adds emotion and judgment. I want that out of there. This is what happened. This is what the president said. I would view this from the whistleblower perspective as a problem. That said, there's one angle on this that's critical. You have one whistleblower report out there. Republicans say it's secondhand. What this tells you is there's lots of people on the inside saying, they're saying this secondhand. I had the same response that this person said. These kind of people, I think, are going to come out of the woodwork, people who didn't like what happened.
Here's what's important, though, about Inspector General reports. They go throughout a department or throughout the agency, and they take this type of anecdotal evidence and use it as a cultural statement about how things are going on. So I think it's important to recognize that these are statements that acknowledge there is a deep, deep problem with how Donald Trump and this administration are conducting the business of the country.
And we should just know, I just want to just note that this is not according to the whistleblower's actual complaint. This is according to a memo that the whistleblower provided.
So it ultimately, I was just going to say the same thing, that this was not actually in the whistleblower report, probably for the reason that you outlined, but it does suggest, according to the reporting, that very shortly after this call between President Trump and President Zelensky, the whistleblower memorialized what people were telling him about the call. And ultimately, the concern that President Trump has really actually focused on is who inside the White House was so concerned about the call that they told the whistleblower about it. I think that's a critical piece here. There are people who are probably currently serving in Trump's White House who are the sources for this information, and that is that's what's problematic for the president, and it's potentially yet another avenue for the Democrats as they're pursuing this impeachment.
But here's what I think is problematic, and I really struggle with this. We're talking about the possible impeachment of a sitting president, removing him from office largely based on someone that we don't know who it is. I think everything is credible. I think it's backed up. I think it's documented. He was meticulous. But I think if we are seriously talking about ripping someone who was elected out of office, we ultimately need to know who that person is. And that's unfair. It's hard. He or she is going to get smeared. But it's a difficult thing to keep basing everything on this when this person hasn't come out in light and given testimony yet.
Not yet. It's early yet. But I do want to point to the fact that there's a new Washington Post poll out today that finds that 58% of adults polled say they support the decision to start an impeachment inquiry. 58% say Congress should have begun the impeachment inquiry. 38% say should not have. That's a lot of support for beginning the impeachment inquiry.
Well, and that certainly shows that the American public is starting to make a distinction between the Mueller report and what happened in the relitigation of 2016, which does leave a distaste in many people's mouth, and the acknowledgement that, wait a second, this president in office shortly after Mueller testified was doing exactly the same thing that the report outlined. And so this is happening in real time, and it comes at this time when people are already sick of dirty politics, feeling that they're under attack and things are divisive. So to see a president of the United States who should be leading in Syria, foreign affairs, all these other spaces, leading on the economy, really tweeting all day about whether or not somebody should testify, this is not the type of leadership any American wants.
And Phil, independents, I go to you because I think of you as an independent. Independents' support for beginning the probe, not necessarily for impeaching, but beginning the inquiry, has gone up 20 points since July. It's 57% now against 38%. But that number, the Post notes, has gone up 20 points since July from 37%. Now it's 57%.
Yeah, but I'm a little bit skeptical on the independent side, and that is because I still don't think the American people fully understand what they're asking for. I don't think they still understand the difference between the House and the Senate process. I think they still don't fully understand what Mitch McConnell is saying. They think this is a simple process where the House goes and investigates and votes, and then something happens with the president. I think that word impeachment is loaded, and I think if you look at it through that lens, the polling data looks a lot different. I don't think the American people know what they're asking for.
And that's why I actually agree with the Republicans, although I think it will backfire on them, and that Speaker Pelosi should hold a vote to go forward in the inquiry so that they define what this is about. Because right now it just does look like endless investigations, endless fighting. But if they have a vote and it's written on paper so people can evaluate the problem they're looking into, that would be helpful for everyone.
And Abby, let me point out to the fact that there's a new Quinnipiac poll out today. Now, this is a different question. Asked if President Trump should be impeached and removed from office, not just the inquiry, but but actually impeached and removed for office, 45% of the American people say yes, 49% say no. So there isn't this zest to get him out of office right now, even if people do want the inquiry to begin.
Yeah, I mean, it does suggest that people do understand that the removal part of this is actually a step further and that they're not quite ready to go there yet. I wish some of these polls would ask both questions separately so that we can have a sense of whether people want the inquiry and removal or just the inquiry and not removal. But we'll take it up with the pollsters later. I just think it's important for us to note that while all of these numbers are kind of a little bit noisy between the polls, the polls do suggest that people are uncomfortable with the behavior that they know about that has been outlined. That's also another source of problems. When people hear about what's going on, they don't like it, and they think that the president is potentially abusing power. I think that's more of what we should be paying attention to as we go forward.
It's the quest for accountability and wanting some check on the administration.
All right, everyone stick around. We got more to talk about President Trump on the current situation in northeast Syria. Both political parties, including loyal allies to President Trump and the Republican Party, have excoriated his decision to withdraw U.S. troops there, given that the Kurds who live there have been stalwart allies of the U.S., and there are credible fears that without the U.S. there, Turkey might massacre them. CNN, some more breaking news for you now. CNN is learning that at any moment, President Trump's lawyers will tell House Democrats in a letter that President Trump and the Trump administration will not cooperate in the impeachment inquiry, arguing that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is holding an illegitimate impeachment process. CNN's Pamela Brown joins me now live. Pamela, what can you tell us about this letter?
Well, Jake, a source familiar with the matter says the White House is expected to release this letter to congressional Democrats later today. And we're told it's a blistering letter, Jake, where the White House will make the argument that President Trump and his administration have no choice but not to cooperate with the Democrats' ongoing impeachment inquiry. The White House making this argument that the inquiry is illegitimate and is an effort to overturn the 2016 election results. And it also will make the case that it circumvents, by not having this vote, it circumvents President Trump's due process rights, and it will point out irregularities in the Democrats' investigation. I'm told it will also take direct aim at Adam Schiff when Schiff had said he hadn't had contact with the whistleblower, but then we had later learned that his committee did have some sort of contact, and then also Schiff's reading of the transcript. Those will be a couple of the items in this letter that will be going to the Hill momentarily. But we should point out, Jake, that I'm told the White House doesn't go so far as to corner itself in terms of saying, if you hold the vote, then we will give you everything you're looking for and will cooperate. Go ahead, Jake.
All right, Pamela Brown, thank you so much with the latest. And Abby, Phillip, we should point out that the Constitution does not actually have rules for how somebody's going to be impeached. And the last time this was done during the Bill Clinton impeachment, the House of Representatives isn't even necessarily set up the same way. The committees might be different.
Yeah.
So, they can claim this, but it's not based on the Constitution.
Exactly. And I think most impeachment experts agree that there's actually no requirement for an impeachment vote. And so I think it really kind of calls into question whether this is really a legal document or really more of a political document. It sounds like, from Pam's reporting, they're going to be rehashing some of the arguments we've been hearing from President Trump about Adam Schiff, claiming, and I think we should say falsely, that there was something irregular about a committee staffer directing the whistleblower to go through a formal process. That's actually pretty much by the book how it's supposed to be done. But they're going to be raising that as part of the argument against this. And I think this is another part of the political pushback. I just don't know how much legal weight it has in stopping Nancy Pelosi.
I think an impeachment vote would be a clarifying exercise. But make no mistake, this is about the White House trying to gain control over a process they have no control of. They believe once there's a vote held, Republicans will get subpoena power. And so for every legitimate witness that the Democrats bring, like a Bill Taylor, expect to bring in a Rudy Giuliani to blow it up.
Yeah.
This is exactly like after the Mueller report, before anybody even got to see it. Bill Barr released a messaging document saying this is what this is all about and how it should be. Ultimately, this is going to be oversight by the bodies of Congress that already have the legal authority to conduct oversight. They don't need a vote to do that.
All right. Thanks, one and all, for being here. Coming up, the NBA backtracking and now saying that they actually are not sorry for that tweet.